It all started on a calm, ordinary Tuesday evening. I was sitting in my living room, scrolling through my phone when I noticed something strange. You know those little things that just feel off, but you can't quite put your finger on them? Yeah, that was it. Something was nagging at me. My electric bill had come in and it was unusually high. I'm talking nearly double what it normally was. Now, I'm pretty cautious when it comes to using electricity. I don't leave lights on for no reason, I'm not running appliances 24/7, and my air conditioning isn't on all day like some people. So when I saw that bill, I couldn't help but wonder, what in the world was going on? At first I brushed it off. Maybe I'd left something on, maybe the fridge was working overtime. But then as the days passed, the suspicion grew. It just didn't make sense. I've always been one to keep track of my energy usage. If I'm being honest, I'm kind of proud of how low my electric bills usually are. So when this one hit, it felt like something bigger was going on. There had to be a reason. I had to find out what was draining all that power. I spent the next few days keeping an eye on things. I started noticing the oddest thing. Every time I came home from work, my garage light would be on. Now, I'm no expert, but my garage light doesn't usually turn itself on. I began to wonder if someone had been using the power from the outlet outside my garage. The thought of it irritated me, but I shrugged it off. After all, it was just a hunch, right? Then one evening after work, I pulled into my driveway and noticed something that made my heart race. It was subtle, almost like a small detail I could have easily missed. But there it was, just outside my garage, a thick cable running along the ground, leading right to my outlet. I froze for a second, staring at it. The cable wasn't just resting there like maybe it had fallen by accident. No, this thing was carefully plugged in. And if the cable was leading from my outlet, then that could only mean one thing. Someone had been stealing power from me. I had to admit it, this wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. My neighbor Karen had been acting strange lately. She lived next door in a house that was just a little too perfect. You know the type, always on top of everything, trying to one-up everyone and always walking around with a self-important air. We didn't speak much, but I knew her well enough. She was the type to complain about anything and everything, especially when it came to rules. And for some reason, I had this feeling in my gut that this wasn't the first time she'd bent the rules. I stood there staring at that cable, my mind racing. Was I really going to confront her? What was I supposed to even say? Hey, Karen, I've noticed you've been using my electricity to charge your car? It sounded ridiculous, but the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. This wasn't just an accident. This wasn't some innocent mistake. She had been doing this on purpose. And what was worse, she had been doing it for who knows how long without a second thought. The anger started to rise, and before I even fully realized it, I found myself walking toward her house. My mind was made up. I was going to confront her. I didn't care how awkward it was or what she would think of me. This had gone too far. I knocked on her door, my heart pounding. After a few moments, she answered, her face plastered with that fake, smiley expression she always wore. Oh, hey there. What's up? She asked like everything was perfectly normal. I cleared my throat, trying to stay calm. I noticed something strange. There's a cable running from my garage to your car. What's going on? Her eyes flicked toward the ground for a brief second, and then she looked back up at me. All that? I was charging my Tesla. I didn't think it would be a big deal. She said it so casually, like she wasn't stealing my electricity. Like it was something she did all the time. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It wasn't even about the Tesla, to be honest. She could have an entire fleet of Teslas if she wanted. What pissed me off was the fact that she didn't even ask. She didn't have the decency to at least ask if it was okay to use my power. No, she just plugged it in and acted like it was no big deal. But what really got under my skin was the fact that she thought she could get away with it. That was the part that really annoyed me. The audacity. I tried to keep my voice steady as I responded, Karen, this isn't okay. You can't just steal my electricity whenever you want. She shrugged, giving me a look that made it clear she didn't really care. It's not that big of a deal, she said again, like this was all some small misunderstanding. It's just a few kilowatts. You won't even notice. I could feel my blood boiling. It's not just about the power, Karen, I snapped. It's about respect. And the fact that you think you can do whatever you want without asking anyone is what's driving me crazy. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she just stood there, staring at me like I was the one who was being unreasonable. I knew at that moment she wasn't going to stop, not unless something was done about it. But what could I do? The HOA was a joke, they wouldn't take my side. If I made a fuss, they'd probably just tell me to let it go. I knew that. So, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I couldn't just let her get away with this. She needed to learn a lesson. A lesson about boundaries. And about the consequences of taking advantage of others. After that tense conversation with Karen, I expected her to stop. I really did. I thought maybe, just maybe, the awkwardness of being confronted face to face would be enough to make her back off. But I was wrong. Dead wrong. The next morning I walked outside just to check. I hoped the cable would be gone. That maybe she had gotten the message. Instead, what I saw made my stomach twist. The cord was plugged in again. Same outlet. Same direction. Same smug theft. It felt like a slap in the face. At that moment, I realized something important about Karen. She wasn't just inconsiderate. She wasn't clueless. No, she was entitled. The kind of person who believes that rules don't apply to her. That other people's property is just there for her convenience. I stood there for a long time, staring at that cable, the morning sun shining on it like it was mocking me. This wasn't just stealing anymore. This was defiance. My hands were shaking, partly from anger, partly from disbelief. She had looked me in the eyes, told me it was no big deal, and then went right back to doing it like our conversation never happened. Like I was some kind of background character in her little world. I went back inside and paced around my living room for a while. I didn't even touch my coffee. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, trying to figure out what to do next. Call the HOA? Report it? But I already knew what they'd say. I could almost hear their bored voices now. We'll look into it, followed by weeks of nothing. They were useless. And Karen knew that too. That's why she kept doing it. Because she knew no one would stop her. So I decided I would. But first I needed proof. Real proof. The kind you can't argue with. If she wanted to play this game, I'd make sure I played it better. That night, I waited until after dark and set up a camera just inside my garage window. A small one tucked out of sight. It faced the outlet and had night vision. I figured if she was doing this during the day, she was probably bold enough to do it at night too. And I was right. Around 2 a.m. the camera caught her. The footage showed Karen walking casually up to my outlet, dragging her long black cable behind her like she'd done it 100 times before. She didn't even look around. No hesitation. She plugged it in, walked away, and went back inside her house. That was it. That was the moment everything shifted. I wasn't just annoyed anymore. I was done. She had lied to my face, dismissed my concern, and then kept stealing from me like it was her right. Watching her on that camera, so relaxed and shameless, it lit something inside me. Not just anger but resolve. The next day I printed out screenshots from the footage. Not just one but several, each one clear and undeniable. I walked over to her house again, this time with a folder in hand. When she opened the door, she didn't even flinch. "Oh, hi," she said like she didn't know what this was about. I didn't say much. I just handed her the folder and looked her straight in the eyes. Her smile faded fast. She flipped through the pictures in silence, her face tightening with each one. Then she tried to speak. "This isn't what it looks like," she started, but I held up a hand. "I've given you warnings," I said calmly. "You ignored them. I'm not playing anymore." She didn't argue. She just shut the door in my face. I stood there for a second, stunned. Not because I didn't expect it, but because of how fast she'd flipped from fake cheerful to cold and silent. That was her move, pretend everything's fine until she gets caught, then go stone-faced and hope it blows over. I didn't care anymore. I had the proof I needed. I sent the pictures and the video footage to the HOA. I knew it probably wouldn't go anywhere, but I did it anyway, just to have it on record. And then I got to work. I'm not an electrician by trade, but I'm handy. Over the years, I've fixed up a lot around the house. So when I started digging into how my outlet was wired, I wasn't totally clueless. I did some research. A lot of it, actually. I read forums, watched videos, talked to a friend who works with circuits. And I came up with a plan. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't dangerous. It was just smart. I installed a device, simple but clever. A circuit with a built-in interrupt. Basically, it could detect when an unfamiliar device was plugged in. Not something I registered as my own. And when it did, it would break the connection instantly, just like a blown fuse. It wouldn't harm anything. It wouldn't start a fire. But it would make it impossible to charge a car, or anything, without permission. It was the perfect middle finger. The whole setup took a few hours over the weekend. I tested it carefully. Plugged in my tools, lights, even a portable fan. Everything worked fine. But when I mimicked a Tesla charger, click, dead circuit. Exactly what I wanted. Then I waited. The next night around the same time, 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected. I opened the app, half smiling already, and there she was. Karen. Dragging her cable like usual, walking up to the outlet like it belonged to her. She plugged it in. 2 seconds later, the circuit tripped. She stood there, confused, looking around like something had glitched. Then she tried again. Plug, trip, plug, trip, over and over. I sat on my couch watching it in real time, biting my lip to keep from laughing. Eventually she gave up. But it wasn't over. The next morning, I was outside watering the plants when I heard shouting from across the fence. Karen was on the phone, pacing her driveway. Something about charging port not responding, and won't connect to charger. I didn't say anything. I just listened. Later that day I saw her car being towed. The charger had failed. Completely. Whether it was a surge, a compatibility error, or just dumb luck, I didn't care. She was finally paying the price for treating my property like it was hers. But I wasn't satisfied yet. Not entirely. She still hadn't come clean. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just silence. And that silence? That was louder than anything she could have said. I kept an eye out for a few days, half expecting Karen to come knocking, demanding to know what I had done. But she didn't. No apology. No confrontation. Just silence. It was the kind of silence that wasn't peaceful. It felt like the calm before a storm. The Tesla was gone for almost a week. Parked somewhere, maybe in a shop. Maybe at a dealership. I didn't care. I just kept going about my routine, pretending like nothing had happened. But inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. Not just because she was finally cut off from my power, but because I finally had control over the situation. But I wasn't naive. I knew someone like Karen wouldn't let this slide forever. Entitled people like her, they don't back down. They don't reflect. They wait. They simmer. And then they come back twice as annoying. That moment came on a sunny Saturday afternoon. I was out front trimming the hedges when I heard her voice, sharp, bitter, and loud enough to carry across the yard. "You know you've cost me hundreds in damage, right?" she snapped. I turned around slowly. She was standing at the edge of her driveway, arms crossed, sunglasses on like she was trying to shield herself from her own embarrassment. I said nothing at first. Just waited. She took a few steps closer. "Whatever you did to that outlet, it fried my charger. The dealership said it shorted out something inside. I had to get it replaced. You're lucky I'm not suing." I let out a breath and smiled. Not because I thought it was funny, but because it was the most predictable line she could have said. "You're lucky I'm not suing." Classic Karen. "Interesting," I said calmly. "Because I remember telling you clearly to stop using my outlet. More than once." She scoffed. "You didn't have to sabotage it. You could have just locked it up or something." "I did something better," I said. "I protected my property. Legally." She looked thrown off. Like she didn't expect me to have a solid answer. That threw her off balance just for a moment. And in that moment, I could see the frustration bubbling behind her expression. She wanted a fight. She was dying for it. But I wasn't going to give her one. "You know what?" she said after a pause. "I'm reporting this to the HOA. We'll see how they feel about homeowners installing traps on community property." I couldn't help but laugh. Community property? Karen, that outlet is literally on my wall. Under my security light. On my private lot. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For someone who loved to quote rules and bylaws, she didn't seem to understand the basics of property lines. "Go ahead," I added. "Report it. I already submitted a complaint weeks ago. Along with photo and video proof of you charging your car without permission." The way her face dropped, it was priceless. That fake confidence melted into a kind of twitchy panic. Not big, not dramatic, but just enough that I knew I'd hit her where it hurt. She turned and stormed off without another word. Now, I didn't know what she was actually going to do next. She could have filed a complaint. She could have tried to twist the story, make herself out to be the victim. But at that point I didn't care. I had played fair. I had documented everything. And most importantly, I had taken control back from someone who thought she could walk all over me. But life has a funny way of handing out poetic justice. 3 days later, I got a letter in the mail from the HOA. My stomach dropped for a second when I saw the logo, just for a moment. But when I opened it, I nearly laughed out loud. It wasn't a warning for me. It was a notice of violation for Karen. It stated that she had been caught using a neighbor's property without consent. That her unauthorized use of power constituted a breach of HOA policies. She was being fined. And the best part? A formal note was added to her file. A black mark that would follow her if she ever tried to sell her house or dispute future complaints. I didn't need to tell anyone about it. The next morning as I walked out to get the mail, I saw her across the yard. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just stood there, arms crossed again like she was trying to hold herself together. But this time there was no shouting. No smugness. Just silence. That silence? Now it was satisfying. For the next few days things stayed quiet. No cables. No confrontations. No drama. I focused on work, caught up on some home projects, and even slept better at night knowing no one was leeching off me. But in the back of my mind, there was still a tiny voice whispering that it wasn't over. Because people like Karen, they never truly go away. They just wait for the next chance. And that chance came in the form of a strange delivery. One morning I found a package on my doorstep. No name, no sender, just a plain box. I opened it, confused, and inside was something that made me blink. A generic EV charger. New and used, still in the plastic. There was no note. No message. Nothing. At first I didn't know what to think. Was it a peace offering? A weird attempt to settle the score? Or maybe, just maybe, it was Karen's twisted way of saying, I'll get my own power now. Whatever it was, I wasn't going to use it. I left it in the garage untouched. I didn't want anything that came from her. Not even a free charger. A few days later, I saw an electrician's truck parked in front of her house. Two guys were working around the side installing something by her driveway. I watched from my window as they set up a brand new charging station. Slick, modern, costly. And you know what? It made me laugh. Because in the end that's what it took. All this drama, all this nonsense, and all she had to do was pay for her own charger like every other responsible EV owner. It was never about the money. Not for her. It was about the control. The power, literally and figuratively. The belief that she could take what she wanted, bend the rules, and never get caught. But she did. And while I never got a proper apology, I didn't need one. Because now, every time she plugs in her Tesla, she has to walk past that outlet on my wall. The one she thought she could use forever. The one that said, nope. And maybe, just maybe, that outlet will remind her that not everyone is a pushover. Things were calm for a while. After the installation of her shiny new EV charger, Karen stopped being visible. Not a single glance. Not a word. She became like wallpaper, always there but unnoticeable. It was strange how quickly everything shifted. Just weeks ago, she was marching around like she owned the place, slinging her power cable across my property without a care in the world. Now, silence. That kind of eerie quiet that makes you feel like something's still brewing beneath the surface. I should have felt peace. Maybe I did for a little while. But peace with someone like Karen never lasts long. It wasn't long before the weirdness started creeping back in. It started small. My trash cans were moved slightly from where I usually left them. Not a lot, just enough to make me question if I had done it myself. Then came the sprinklers. I always have them on a set timer. Same time every day. Suddenly they were off. The entire front lawn was bone dry. When I checked the system, it had been reset. No record. No change log. Just blank. That's when it clicked, she wasn't done. She couldn't plug into my power anymore, but she still wanted control. She wanted to let me know she hadn't forgotten. So I adjusted. I started locking the control box for my sprinklers. I put a heavy-duty padlock on the gate to the side of my house. I even put tiny markers around things I'd leave outside, just so I'd know if they'd been moved. It was like playing a game of chess with a ghost. Then one night I caught something strange. Around 1 a.m., my motion sensor light in the backyard flicked on. It doesn't happen often. There's nothing back there but my shed and a few trees. I checked the live camera feed just to be safe, expecting maybe a raccoon or a stray cat. But no. What I saw made my stomach turn. A figure. Slim. But up. Creeping along the fence line near the shed. I couldn't see the face, but something in the way they moved, it felt familiar. Too familiar. They stayed for maybe 30 seconds. Didn't touch anything. Just looked around. Then slipped back over the fence and disappeared into the dark. I sat in my living room for a long time after that. Not scared exactly, but unsettled. I knew it wasn't random. It wasn't just some kid being stupid. It felt deliberate. Personal. And deep down I knew who it was. The next morning I checked the fence. No damage but a few scuff marks. I checked the backyard, nothing missing. But it wasn't about what was taken. It was about the message, I can still get close. I debated calling the police. But what would I say? I think my neighbor might be sneaking into my yard at night because she used to steal my electricity? It sounded insane. And she knew it. That's what made her bold. But bold doesn't mean smart. Because Karen made a mistake. Just 2 nights later, I adjusted my camera angle slightly, pointed it more toward the side of the fence she came from. I upgraded the resolution, boosted the IR range, and I waited. She came back. Same hoodie. Same creeping movement. But this time the camera got her face. Not fully, just enough. A partial angle. But it was her. I knew it. The sharp jawline. The same ridiculous oversized earrings she always wore. Clear as day. Now I had her again. I didn't confront her this time. I didn't want to spook her. I wanted to know how far she was willing to go. So I left things exactly as they were. I made no changes. Let her think I was unaware. I even stopped checking the cameras for a few days, on purpose. But behind the scenes, I was collecting footage. She came back 2 more times. Always late. Always quiet. Always leaving without touching anything. But on the 3rd visit she slipped. She walked right past the motion sensor and the spotlight lit her up like a stage. She froze. Looked directly at the camera. And turned around fast. That was the last time I saw her near my property. But it wasn't the last move she made. One afternoon about a week later, a letter showed up taped to my front door. Not mailed. Not dropped off. Taped. It was typed. No signature. No name. Just a short, smug paragraph about mutual respect between neighbors, and how some people shouldn't escalate things that don't concern them. It ended with, "Sometimes people retaliate in ways you never expect." That was it. No proof it was from her, but come on. Who else would leave something like that? Who else would be that petty, that passive-aggressive, that vague and threatening at the same time? I didn't bother responding. I took a photo of the letter and added it to the folder. Same one that held the photos. The video clips. Everything. And then I did something else. I installed a sign. Right above the outlet she used to love so much. A big, bold metal plate that said, "Private property. Monitored 24/7. Trespassing will be prosecuted." It wasn't just a warning. It was a message. Let's be clear, this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about being petty. This was about boundaries. This was about a neighbor who had decided that other people's space, other people's time, and other people's things didn't matter. And I wasn't going to let her rewrite the rules just because she didn't like them. From that day on, things finally changed. No more cable. No more shady nighttime strolls. The Tesla stayed plugged into her own charger. The trash can stayed untouched. The sprinklers stayed on schedule. It was like the whole neighborhood reset itself. But it never went back to the way it was before. Every time I saw her backing out of her driveway, I could feel her eyes on me. Not with rage. Not with guilt. But with resentment. Like I was the problem. Like I had crossed her line. And maybe in her world I did. Because people like Karen don't see themselves as wrong. They don't see others as equals. They live in their own narrative where everything revolves around their needs, their comforts, their versions of fairness. I wasn't a neighbor to her. I was an obstacle. A wall she didn't think she had to climb, until it pushed back. And the truth is, I wasn't proud of how far it all went. I wasn't thrilled that I had to rig a circuit just to protect my own outlet. I wasn't excited to set up cameras and watch footage at 2 a.m. like I was guarding a fortress. That's not the life I wanted when I bought this house. But if there's one thing I learned, it's this. Sometimes, standing your ground means becoming a little bit more stubborn than the person trying to push you. Not cruel. Not aggressive. Just firm. Unshakable.